My daughter-in-law told me the guest room needed to be repainted. That was the first sign. I just didn't know it yet. Her exact words were, "Margaret, we're thinking of turning that room into a home office. For Ryan, you understand, right?" She said it the way you tell someone the restaurant was out of their order. Casual, final, like it had already been decided. I said, "Of course." Because I was trying to be easy. I was always trying to be easy. My name is Margaret. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a school librarian in Asheville, North Carolina. I raised one son. I buried one husband. And for the last 4 years, I shared my home with people who slowly, quietly, convinced themselves it belonged to them. Let me tell you how it started. And let me tell you how it ended. When my husband, Donald, passed in the spring of 2019, the house became very loud in its silence. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a wraparound porch Donald had built himself over 3 summers, one section at a time because that was the way he did things. Slow and right. The kind of man who read the instructions twice before he opened the box. We had paid off the mortgage 7 years before he died. 30 years of payments. And then one morning, it was just ours. Fully, completely ours. I remember Donald making pancakes that weekend to celebrate. He said, "Maggie, nobody can take this from us now." He was right. Nobody could. After he passed, my son Ryan called from Charlotte every few days. He was 34 then, working in logistics, married to a woman named Deb for about 2 years. She had a sharp kind of prettiness, the kind that made you feel like you were being evaluated when she looked at you. I didn't dislike her. I want to be fair. In the beginning, I genuinely tried. Ryan started mentioning, gently at first, that he worried about me alone in such a big house. 4 bedrooms, Mom. That's a lot of space for one person. He wasn't wrong. Some mornings, I'd walk past the closed doors and feel the emptiness like something physical. So when he suggested they move in, I said yes. Not because I needed them, but because I thought it would be good for all of us. I thought we'd be a family. I even helped with the transition. Ryan and Deb had been renting a place in Charlotte, and they'd been putting money toward a down payment on a house of their own. I offered to hold that money for them, help it grow a little, keep it safe while they settled in. Ryan seemed relieved. Deb smiled and said, "That's so generous, Margaret." I should have paid more attention to the way she said my name. Never Mom, always Margaret. 4 years, and it never changed. The first year was fine, better than fine, some weeks. Ryan and I would have coffee on the porch on Saturday mornings, and it reminded me of when he was in high school, before his father got sick, when we were all still figuring out who we were going to be. I'd make his eggs the way he liked them. He'd tell me about work. We were easy with each other. Deb was harder to reach. She worked remotely, designing marketing materials for a company based out of Denver, and she kept odd hours. She'd appear in the kitchen at 2 in the afternoon looking for something specific and be frustrated when it wasn't there. She started reorganizing the pantry without asking. Small things, the kind of thing where if you said something, you'd sound petty, so you didn't say anything. By the second year, the reorganizing had spread. The living room furniture got shifted. My reading chair, an old wingback I'd had since before Ryan was born, ended up in the corner facing the wall because Deb said it broke the flow. I moved it back one afternoon when they were both out. The next week, it was in the corner again. I moved it back again. She never said anything directly. Neither did I. That was the problem with all of it. Everything happened in the space between what was said and what wasn't. By year 3, Ryan had started calling the house our place when he talked to friends on the phone. I heard him once from the hallway. "Yeah, we've got a big house, plenty of room. Not my mom's house, not even Mom's house. Just our place," like the word had already been filed and signed. I told myself I was being sensitive. The guest room, my sewing room, the one I'd used for 20 years to work on quilts, to store Donald's books, to have a place that was just mine, became Ryan's home office. I moved my sewing things into the bedroom closet. I told myself it was a reasonable compromise. It wasn't a compromise. It was the first of several concessions I made because I was afraid of being difficult. Then came the porch. Donald's porch. 3 summers of his hands and his patience, Deb had decided it needed new furniture. She'd found a set she liked online, modern, angular, the kind that looks beautiful in a catalog and is deeply uncomfortable to actually sit in. She showed me the photo on her phone like it was a gift. "Doesn't this look amazing?" I said. "We already have porch furniture." She said, "Margaret, those chairs are practically antiques." They were Donald's chairs. I've been sitting in them for 15 years. Ryan said they'd pay for the new ones. I said I didn't want new ones. It got quiet in a way that felt like pressure. 2 days later, I came home from the library to find the old chairs at the end of the driveway with a freen sign on them. Deb said she thought I'd agreed. I hadn't agreed, but I didn't say that. I went inside and sat on the edge of the bed in my own bedroom, and I just breathed. I thought about Donald. I thought about what he would have done. I already knew the answer. He would have been furious. But Donald was not a man who let fury make his decisions for him. He'd have waited until he was calm. He'd have thought it through. Then he'd have acted. So that's what I decided to do. The thing that changed everything was a Thursday in October. Ryan came home early from a work trip. Deb had made dinner, which was unusual, and the table was set, which was also unusual, and I sat down thinking this was a nice evening, thinking maybe things were getting easier between all of us. Then Deb set down her fork and said, "Margaret, we've been talking, and we think it's time to discuss some changes around here." I asked what kind of changes. Ryan said, and I can still hear the particular tone he used, like he'd rehearsed it. "We're thinking this house makes more sense as our primary residence, long-term, and we thought maybe you'd be happier somewhere smaller, more manageable. There are some really lovely 55-plus communities about 20 minutes from here." I put my hands in my lap so they wouldn't see them. Deb said, "You'd have people your own age, activities. You wouldn't be so isolated." I wasn't isolated. I had friends. I had my book club. I had Ruth and Patricia from the library, and my neighbor Helen, who brought me tomatoes from her garden every August. I was not a woman waiting to be managed. I said, "This is my house." Ryan said, "We know that, Mom." He said it gently, which was somehow worse. But think about what makes sense going forward, practically speaking. I looked at my son across the table in the house where he had grown up, at the table where he had done his homework and eaten his birthday dinners and cried the night before he left for college, and I understood something clearly for the first time. He wasn't asking me. He was telling me. I excused myself and said I needed some air. I sat on the porch, the new porch furniture that felt like sitting on a park bench, and I looked out at the yard Donald had planted, the oak tree Ryan had climbed as a boy, the hydrangeas along the fence that came back every year without being asked. And I made my decision. I didn't say a word about it at breakfast the next morning, or the morning after that. I was pleasant. I asked about their days. I made my grocery list, and quietly, carefully, I started to move. The first call I made was to a woman named Carol, who had been my neighbor 3 houses down until she'd moved to Greenville to be near her grandchildren. She knew everyone. She also knew real estate. I told her I was thinking about selling my home and asked if she knew anyone discreet. She said, "Define discreet." I said, "Someone who can move quickly and doesn't need yard signs right away." She gave me a name. The realtor was a man named Gerald, semi-retired, who specialized in off-market sales. He came over on a Tuesday morning when Ryan was at work and Deb had driven to Raleigh for a conference. I showed him the whole house, every room. He stood on the porch for a long moment and said, "Whoever built this did beautiful work." I said, "My husband," one section at a time. He put together a listing that same week. The house went to a young family, a teacher and a nurse with 2 small children who had been looking in the area for 8 months. They made an offer within 10 days. A good offer. A real offer. The kind that doesn't leave you wondering. I signed the papers on a Wednesday. Ryan was at work. Deb was in a yoga class. I want to be clear about something. I did not do this out of cruelty. I did not do it because I wanted to hurt my son. I did this because I finally understood that I had spent 3 years making myself smaller in a house I had paid for and loved and raised a family in. And the people I was making myself smaller for had just told me, politely, over dinner, that I should go live somewhere more manageable. I was 67, not 90. I managed fine. I had already found my own place, a townhouse, about 12 minutes away in a quiet neighborhood with a small back patio and enough room for my sewing things and Donald's books and my reading chair, which I had moved out of the house 3 weeks earlier under the pretense of donating it. I moved everything that mattered in stages over 2 weeks. Nothing dramatic, just steady. Helen helped. Ruth helped. Patricia drove over on a Saturday with her truck and her son, and they moved the rest. Carol brought lunch. We sat on the floor of the new townhouse eating sandwiches surrounded by boxes, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt like myself again. The closing was on a Friday. The family moved in the following Tuesday, which was faster than usual because they'd been in a rental and were ready. Gerald handled everything professionally. Ryan came home Tuesday evening to find a moving truck in the driveway. Not my moving truck. Theirs. He called me. I let it ring. I was unpacking the kitchen. He called again. I answered. He said, "Mom, there are people moving into the house." I said, "I know. I sold it." Silence. He said, "What do you mean you sold it?" I said, "It was my house, Ryan. I signed the deed over in 1987. Your father and I paid off the mortgage in 2012. I have the right to sell it whenever I choose." More silence. He said, "Where are we supposed to go?" I said, "I imagine you'll figure something out. You're resourceful." He said, "Mom." I said, "I have to go. I'm still unpacking." I hung up. I want to tell you something about the weeks after that because they were not uncomplicated. Ryan called many times. He was angry first, which I expected. Then he was hurt, which was harder. Deb did not call at all, which told me something. He sent a long text one night that I read in my new kitchen with my reading chair visible through the doorway. And about halfway through the text, he stopped being defensive and started being honest. And the honesty was harder than the anger. He said he hadn't realized how much ground had shifted. He said Deb and he had talked about the house for so long as a plan that he'd stopped seeing it as my home. He said he didn't know when that happened. I believed him. That's the thing about gradual changes. Nobody sees them until someone stops and points at the distance between where you started and where you ended up. I also want to be honest. Selling the house was not painless for me. That porch was Donald's. That oak tree was Ryan's. The kitchen was 30 years of mornings. I mourned it. I still do sometimes when the light is a particular kind of late afternoon gold that reminds me of autumns there. But I knew I could not stay in a place where I was being managed, where my chair got moved to the corner, where my son sat across from me at my own table and told me it might be time to find somewhere more suitable. I had been suitable my entire life. I was done being suitable. Ryan and Deb found a rental in Charlotte within 3 weeks. They have their own place now, their own furniture, their own walls, their own decisions. I think that's actually been good for them, though I suspect Deb would never say so. Ryan and I have been rebuilding slowly. He came to the townhouse for Thanksgiving. He sat in Donald's reading chair. I offered it, and he took it, and he was quiet for a moment before he sat down. He helped me hang a few pictures after dinner. He said the place suited me. I said I thought so too. He apologized, properly, in January. Not a text. He came over, sat at my kitchen table, and said he was sorry. He said it plainly, without qualifications, which is how an apology should be given. I accepted it. I'm his mother, but I also want him to understand, clearly and permanently, what was at stake. Your parents are not a problem to be solved. They are not a logistical inconvenience. They are not a house to be converted into your primary residence. They built things, literally, sometimes with their hands, that you will never fully understand the weight of, and they deserve to be in rooms where their chairs face the windows. The money from the house sale is in an account with my name on it. I used some of it to set up the townhouse. I used some to take a trip to see my sister in Tucson, which I've been putting off for years. The rest is mine, to do with as I decide. when I decide. Donald used to say, never let anyone make you feel like a guest in your own life. I forgot that for a while. I won't forget it again. The hydrangeas along the fence at the old house came back this summer. I drove past one morning in late June and saw them, blue and full, the way they always were. The young family had left them just as they were. Some things take care of themselves, if you let them.